think first things I like to talk about is the slides I use, because I think they're probably the most important aspect of sort of playing slide guitar. I've tried brass, I've tried Pyrex, but I've ended up with these that are made by Ian McWee, and they're just some of the best slides I've used because of the weight of them, really. So Diamond Bottlenecks, the company that make these, and I was at his shop a few years back, and he said to me, how'd you fancy coming on board? Because I'd been buying slides off him for a few years. So he's made my signature one. So, but he'll make any sort of custom slide you want. Wall thickness. Personally, I like a 18 mil and a 63 mil height. But whatever you want, so if you wanted a really heavy slide, you can make one of those. And I just, especially for acoustic sort of guitar, a nice weighty slide would really help. Instead of the Pyrex ones, the weight can really help with vibrato. It can slow you down a little bit and help get some good vibrato. So there's that. So the guitar, this is a 1929 National Triolean, and I would say this has to be my my number one guitar. I just absolutely love it. The amount of songs it's given me. It really has got a personality and a kind of its own separate entity, really. And talk about this a bit. So it's got the original cone in there. For anyone who doesn't play resonators, they have a cone instead of an acoustic guitar with a hole. This has a cone that's turned upside down like a speaker cone, and kind of the strings go on what's called a biscuit bridge, and the vibrations go that way and back out of the body chamber. So yeah, everyone likes to try and keep the original cones. Like I said, it's 1929. I'm lucky that the original cone's in there, so it's got a sort of it's definitely got a different voice to a new cone. So that's absolutely great. The pickup I use on this is a Barkus Berry, a high-tech, and they made those kind of in the 80s, I think. Took a lot of tracking down this one, but I tried other different pickups, but they were too open sounding for my playing. If you're playing acoustic resonator and you want that kind of acoustic sound, that openness, then brands like Crevo are fantastic. All those guys in Highlander, but I find this Barkus Berry to be perfect, because I like kind of a humbuckery sound that I can put through a gain pedal, So yeah, it's had a new fretboard put on it. That was probably a couple of years back. That's quite common things with these guitars. You have to have sort of like certain things done to them now and again, and it's quite it's a common thing. And it's got a rod in there, and they didn't build them with truss rods, but it's got a nice sort of rod to keep that neck sort of rigid. Yeah, it's just a solid guitar. They're like tanks. I'd take this thing on the road. It's been around Europe with me, and it's just bulletproof. So it's a great guitar. And I can't recommend Nationals enough. These old ones are just perfect. So I'll talk a little bit about my pedals. So the first thing I would go through, so that's the amp, just clean. So personally, I like to have a little bit of space, sort of reverb and delay. So I've got this this Holy Grail Plus, which is Electro Harmonics, just to give a little bit of space. So it's not too much. It just sets it in nice ambience. And then I got the DD7, the standard digital delay, and that just will set just a nice sort of like shadow delay, which again just sets up a space. Especially if you're playing atmospheric music, you want some kind of atmosphere and like a spatial effect, and that's pretty much for my delays and reverbs. I have this old Akai head rush pedal that I use, and I've gone with that one. It's quite an old model. I've been through quite a few of them, because when I'm using that live, that just seems like the easiest one to access quick. You can change through tap tempo, and it's got a loop function, and it's just it's quite a big unit. It's just when you're playing and you're sort of playing energetically, you want something you just go straight to, and that's always been a sort of great one. So you can get some good taps. So I suppose on to modulation. Well, actually, let's go through some of the gain pedals. So for my gain sort of sound, because I generally play with a loud, kind of like on the edge of sort of breaking up sort of sound, really. And for years I've used a vintage 1988 Rat, which people associate with sort of like rock and hair metal, but Zappa used one, Jeff Beck, all the great players at some point have used those, John Scofield, and you can use them and crank them and have that kind of sound, that hair metal sound if you want that, but there's such a great filter control on these that I think they're one of the best sort of gain sounds, for me, that I've come across, and I keep going back to it. I've gone through the route of buying other ones, different pedals to try to get something special sound, and I've always come back to this. So that's what this sounds with that pedal on. The other pedal I use for gain usually is a boost on top of that, but sometimes I use it by itself. Is the Hamida distortion pedal. Most people know the Zen Drive, which like people like Robin Ford used. So the distortion pedal, it was only produced for a short amount of time, but it's kind of like the Zen Drive, but with more gain. So you can just boost that sort of gain, but it's the same sort of Dumble kind of sound, same sort of circuit. And again, it's just something that on any recording I've ever done, that pedal's been on there because it's just, it has this very specific sort of sound, something it does, it definitely has a, that Dumble sound, so. In combination, it's quite sort of it's kind of on the edge of feedback, but if you like that kind of thing. So modulation-wise, I've got the MXR, the Phase 45. It's a script, the old sort of like one of the old ones, which I think has got a kind of it's definitely got its own sort of flavour. So I'll put that on. I've got that Lowell George kind of thing, that kind of. One thing I don't use is a compressor pedal. I've got compressor pedals at home, and I kind of use them for recording, but I'd like to use gain to get that kind of resonance, which is kind of risky because it's one of those things that can turn into feedback, and you've got to be careful about the way you angle your guitar. But I prefer to do that. I like that sound. So you can hit the guitar and notes will bloom, as opposed to with the compression, it kind of keeps it level and keeps the volume up. So as far as other pedals go, I've got the Roger Mayer Octavia, and I kind of use it sparingly, especially with this guitar. So you know, it's kind of the usual sort of like screaming sort of. So for tremolo, you know, I've tried different pedals out, you know, over the years, and I've come to rely on this one, the Silvertone Jupiter, which is, you know, kind of subtle, you know, if you want it to be, and it just seems to sort of work, you know, for my purposes. So one other effect that I use is mainly for live work is the Digitech whammy. It's just a standard whammy 5. Because you've got, you know, access to 12 frets, occasionally, you know, you might want to sort of like get higher than that. You know, I've definitely written stuff on the new record that, you know, takes me past 12. So then you can use the pedal to do that if you need to. You know, it's okay. Like, you know, it's one of those things. There's more artifacts when you hear it recorded, but. Also a stock Dunlop wah. Again, I've been through sort of, you know, the search for the perfect wah. Got 70s ones and 60s ones, but for the pedalboard for live, I think the standard 95 sort of works really well. So, and that's about it. It's a really simple setup. I'm going into vintage 64 Vox 8030 top boost. And those, you know, as everyone knows, have got incredible sort of warmth and just a characteristic, all to themselves. You know, sometimes when I go out and play live, and I use different amps. I even take a PV Classic 50 out with me, which is just like a workhorse. I've taken that all around Europe, and it's never let me down. You know, but yeah, this amp's a gorgeous beast. So yeah, that's pretty much the setup. I use several tunings on the guitars. You know, I have to take sort of maybe 7 guitars when I go out and gig, you know, which is a nightmare. But I've written, you know, over the years, I've written so many different songs in different tunings that, you know, that's just something I've got to do, you know. So this one, I've got in, I think it's called Orkney tuning, but it's like a C sus tuning. So it's C, G, C, G, C with a D on the top. And you can raise that up, you know, if that's too low, you could do that D, just, you know, shift that up by a tone. And I just find that tuning, you know, really evocative. It's just very easy to be creative and get outside of, you know, if you're used to sort of picking up a guitar standard tuning, and you want to break out of the box of going to the same place that your hands take you to, and and kind of go back to playing by ear, so you're feeling out things instead of your hands dictating what you're coming up with. Personally, I think get into an open tuning, because it's blank. You've got a blank canvas, and you'll play by ear, and your ideas will be driven by your imagination. So you'll hit on things which you would never hit on. The voicings will be completely different, and I think that's a really important thing, helpful thing to do. And it's really helped me that most of the album I'm just putting out was written on this guitar, just guitar and vocal. And it was kind of written in that way. I can go on to the sort of like the Strat and sort of play, I know my scales and modes and all that kind of stuff. But I don't want that. I want to try and get a spark of a song or idea. And like I said, I find these kind of tunings really inspirational. So that's this one. The Silvertone over there, that's in E, just a standard E tuning. And I'm using 11s on that, I think, so it's cranked up fairly tight. And that's, if someone's starting off wanting to play slide guitar, I think the most important thing is just getting a heavier string gauge and just getting the strings tight, so when you play, the slide doesn't bash against your frets. I think that's one of the most important things. And so that's a medium sort of gauge, 11s in E. And this one over here is in open G, which is when that string is your root note. Is you sort of like the open tune there, a bit like what Keith Richards does, with his, but he takes the one string off. So that's that style. That's more the Muddy Waters. When you play that, you end up, it's very easy to go to that place with the guitar because it has that kind of sound. But again, there are so many different tunings, and it's just worth exploring them. Yeah, those are the tunings. Okay, so this is my Silvertone Jupiter, and it's from '64, I believe, around that time. And it's just, at the moment there's a big thing about sort of gold foil pickups, and they're really popular at the minute, which quite rightly, because they're kind of very open sounding, and they're very unique sounding pickup. But this has got silver foil pickups, which are a similar thing, just different casing, but it's from that time. Diamond kind of were making lots of pickups with different sort of looks at the time, but. And they just have they capture the string sound. There's an openness, and I think because it's got a chambered body as well, like Dan Electro's, that kind of sound. It definitely has like a woody, open, stringy kind of tone, which for slide for me, kind of adds to that character. So when you're playing that kind of music, it has that sort of like that smoky kind of sort of like flavour, really, which So it takes game really well, obviously. And that with a bit more gain. So this is another National. This is a Stylo, which is kind of a brass-bodied instrument, which kind of has less top frequencies. Maybe the brass kind of warms up the sound a little bit. This one I've had fitted with a National hot plate, just to make it easy to go out and gig with. Which are great. It's got like a Telecaster kind of pickup here, volume and tone, which can be really handy, just to roll things off a bit. Yeah, just a really solid instrument. Again, I've had the fretboard on this one replaced with ebony, so it should be good for another 50 years, hopefully. So I'll give this one a bit of a play. So I've had this probably maybe 10 years, and it's kind of like a mishmash. It's, you know, it's definitely a parts caster. My uncle made these pickups for me. He hand wound them, scatter wound them. So he built the actual thing to scatter wind them, and I wanted them at 5.3K. So he was cool enough. You know, he'd never done it before. He researched it, found out how to do it, made them for me, and vacuum potted them. And they're great. They're kind of very open sounding, you know, very sort of like vintage kind of 50s sort of sounding pickups. It was kind of like an orange trans finish, which got sort of battered around, so I decided to take that off. And I'm sure it's made a difference because those, you know, those poly finishes are so thick, and it definitely feels like it, you know, after sort of stripping it, it feels like it breathes more, so it's a bit lighter as well. And I know the neck, I think, is Mexican. It's a very flat radius. I like to have a flat board, so this is a 12-inch radius. I've had a roller nut put on here because, and lockers, because I like to use the trem so much. So yeah, it's just, you know, it's again, this guitar's made it onto lots of recordings, you know, because it can do so much, you know. But it's still got that kind of that Strat sound, you know. It's a gorgeous sounding guitar. So just play something with that. I've not really found any problems touring with this guitar. You know, they're pretty robust. The one thing is, you know, just keeping your eye on it, just making sure that, you know, you don't lose sight of it, because so many people have had these kind of things stolen, you know, over the years. That's one thing. The one thing that could happen, a cone could collapse. You know, so the cone, you know, the cone is kind of aluminium, it's very thin, and the strings are kind of putting downward pressure on those. So that could happen. I've heard of, you know, people sort of like out on the road and the cones collapse. But you can get replacement ones. So you just unscrew those, pop the other one in, and it should be about the right height. And tuners, just the usual things on, you know, because these are so sort of basic, you know. But those would be the things, you know. because occasionally, you know, you get the bowed neck, but if you get a new fretboard, you get a truss rod put in there, and that's going to hold that steady. So I think for touring that it's been no problem. You know, it's been really solid. It's just that thing of taking a high value instrument out on the road with you. That's the main concern for me.